Hi guys, this is Nicole Unberger here, and I wanted to come on today and talk a little bit about how to fight CPS corruption. So most of you know my story about CPS and how they took my son from me 14 years ago, and then they conspired against me, including my attorney, to take him away and keep him from me and terminate my rights, even if that meant lying in court and even coercing me into lying without me even knowing it. So I found out 3 years ago that my son needed me. He reached out to me, told me that his life had been terrible and he was getting into trouble. He was not getting his needs met at home, and he was becoming a product of his environment. And so he was going through a rough time. And we recently got CPS involved, and he was surrendered back to the state so that his so-called guardians wouldn't have to face the consequences of their actions, I guess. And he's been in a group home, and I thought that I was going to be able to get him back in one way, but that way did not work. And then finally, there was another way that happened where I've been able to, after 14 years, get my son back. I recently wrote a document a few months ago after Connie regularly reached out to me and shared some things with me and pointed me in the right direction to where I could get the information that I needed. That information helped me learn how to fight. I ended up writing my entire story down in a document. I included pictures to make it personable. I made sure to be articulate and correct on my terminology and definition and spelling. I also included names and numbers and contact addresses of anyone I talked about in my story. I provided all of this information at the end of my document. I then looked up the addresses of the Child Services Commissioner in that state where the case took place. I also looked up the governor, senator, and juvenile court judge, who is my attorney from 14 years ago because he conspired to get in the judge's seat using my case. So I sent copies of this story to all of them, including a few news stations. And at the bottom of the document, I also provided the court information, what court paperwork I had. I made copies of and provided all of that with the documentation. And I told them, if I do not receive some type of proof that you are in receipt of my letter in 30 days or less, I will be going forward legally and doing what I need to do. I will go public with my story. I will talk to radio stations and news stations. I will do podcasts. I will get the money to hire an attorney, and it will cost tens of thousands of dollars. Honestly, you don't even have to hire an attorney though. So that part you can leave out. But you can still say, I will run a campaign and I will get the money that I need to take you down and get you to rectify the situation. I wouldn't necessarily put it in those words. I would say it a little bit nicer. You can represent yourself in a lawsuit. When CPS breaks policies and you have proof of that, my dear, you have proof that they have broken their own laws. When you can prove they broke their own laws and they broke laws within this country, you've got them. There is a lot of information on the internet these days that can help you along the way and help you in that path and help you on that journey. You have to be willing to look for it. There are a lot of CPS corruption advocating groups, but I will tell you this, there are a lot of advocates out there that are kind of arrogant because I've met them. I met one advocate that was more concerned that I call her pastor rather than call her by her first or last name. And that was a distraction for me because I'm not there to validate you or your title, and I'm not up under your teaching or your doctrine. I am here to get help to get my child back. And when I realized what kind of game she was playing, I took a step back. And I said, you know what? I will do this myself. But while I was doing this myself, I found other men and women that were looking for help as well. And I will go and Google and look for the help that people need because that's just who I am. Because it's like, oh, I need to know that too. Let me go look that up. And I don't think a lot of us parents realize you have the power to represent yourself in a litigation, and you can file with the federal courts and get your children back. These people have used us so they can get to our children. Your children are worth $10,000 a head if they are adopted by a non-relative. That is the going rate. And people will say, oh, that's not enough for people to do that. Yes, it is, because it's happening every day. Don't downplay this. Read the news. Read the news. Go look for stories concerning CPS corruption. Go read about the thousands of lawsuits taking place across the country, not just by parents, but by children aging out of the system and finding ways to beat the statutory of limitations on abuse. There is more money in the subsidy for foster parents if children who are fostered have psychiatric issues. If they are on psychiatric medications, they get more money from the government for that child. That's why there's so many children in the foster care system today that are on medication that they don't need to be on. Children who are adopted will, they'll be adopted, but there's also a way you can get money for them if they're adopted. It's called an SSI. And there are parents who do it. There are people who make a career out of fostering children. The two women who adopted my son confessed to me that her mother grew up fostering children. That's how she brought money in. I'm not trying to be rude, but that's not what fostering children is about. Okay? It's not a career. It should be, when you get that money for that child, you should be doing things with that child that their parents might have done with them or didn't do with them. Like, really, it's just crazy. This is a circus. And they say, oh, there are missing puzzle pieces. No, they are not. My children are not the missing pieces to your puzzle. They're my children. I carried them for 9 months. I birthed them. I bonded with them. A piece of paper doesn't take that away. A piece of paper doesn't change that. And I'm sure that adopted parents will magnify the bad that birth parents have done to diminish the good that actually has been there, Unfortunately, because I was medicated with my last pregnancy, I was on methadone because of the cervicalgia. I have a condition called cervicalgia. It requires opiates for treatment or hormone therapy. I couldn't do hormone therapy while I was pregnant, and it would pop up only when I was pregnant. So we had to handle it, and so we were using methadone. I was on 10 milligrams of methadone. And, that's my business. That's my medical business. My doctor, between me and my doctor in DCS, made me feel like a sorry individual because I was choosing to use a path to recovery rather than opiates. And, that played a significant role in my sober journey. So, because it was my condition happening with all my pregnancies and, everything I was going through, that's what I was on. I was on opiates and benzodiazepines at the age of 14, prescribed those medications because of the extreme migraines I was having. So, this to me was a better idea. And DCS just made the worst out of it. They made us out to be horrible people. They treated us like we didn't deserve to be parents. And it's disgusting. Anybody who treats someone like they don't deserve to be a parent just because they're on methadone, like they literally need to get their head checked, because that's not healthy either. Judging someone when you have no idea physically what they're going through. No possible way. So what? You might have been someone who could go through extreme physical things. Not all of us are made like you. Everyone is different and unique. If you think everyone's the same, you really need to get your head checked, because they're not. I haven't been on methadone for years. Now I am a medical cannabis patient, and I am on Subutex. I take 2 milligrams twice a day, and sometimes I forget the second pill. So sometimes it's just once a day. But I didn't know back then what I know now. And my caseworker, Katie Dossett Butler, 14 years ago, we were her first case, and she lied under oath. The foster mom was hiding a pregnancy because it was not by her husband. And the caseworker was helping her. Instead of saying, well, since you don't want them to see this pregnancy, why don't I just supervise the visits? How hard could that have been? How hard would that have been? I mean, we paid $25 a piece every time we wanted to see our son because we had to take a drug test, when by policy in the state of Tennessee, CPS isn't supposed to go and have you take drug screens when you're already being tested by another entity at least once a month. I mean, they had us going through ridiculous hoops. We spent money on 8-hour trips. It was an 8-hour trip, Lizzie. It was an 8-hour trip both ways to Tennessee and back when we would go to see Joshua. Not once did they think about the fact that when they told us he was sick 3 or 4 times in a row for almost 4 months, all the money that we wasted in gas and wasted on those drug tests that we could have spent maybe on our other children that we had at home. But they didn't think about that. They only thought about, we got to get her rights taken from her so we can get this cash bonus. It's a bonus that's able to be divided amongst the department because of the social worker who gets the adoption done. I have a lot of friends that used to work in the business and in the department that are retired now, and they do a lot of talking. So these are things you can Google. Each state gets almost a $10,000 bonus for any child adopted out by a non-relative. That is every state. Why don't you go and Google how much each state gets as a budget for the foster care system? Tennessee gets almost 10 times more than any other state. It's not the only state that gets that much, but it's pretty odd that Tennessee, being Tennessee, gets that much. I think it's because we have a lot of crooked caseworkers. My caseworker lied on her first case. She lied under oath. And I guarantee you, when all of this blows up and we take her to federal court, because it will happen one day, oh, somebody is going to answer for my son's 14 years of suffering and injustices. He became a product of his environment. They gave him to alcoholics, people who drink. Lovely. Wonderful. Thanks for that, Katie. We appreciate that. We appreciate you allowing trauma to enter my son's life at a young age. You have no idea how much we hope karma comes right back and serves you. And we pray we get front row seats. I will never understand why anyone who calls themselves a parent or a mother would ever lie in order to take another parent's parental rights. You had us do everything for 2 years. Yes, there were some things I didn't do, and I didn't have to do them because I knew policies. But I didn't know enough to protect myself, but I know enough now. And I want others to know enough. My caseworker from 14 years ago lied under oath in our case, and she was also on trial testifying on her mother's behalf because her mother was on trial for murder to not just one husband, but 2. And I believe that I can prove that she lied in that testimony as well. She stated, my mother would never try to kill anybody. And you can find this in the article about Ray Nella Dossett Leith, the Oak Ridge Black Widow serial killer. It says that Katie said my mother would never try to kill anybody. But in 1995, Katie, you know good and well that your mother did try to kill somebody. It was a district attorney that she shot bullets at until she ran out of bullets. You can find that man's testimony on YouTube. So that was a lie under oath. And then she hand-fed the rest of her testimony to the jury about how they loved and cared for one another when speaking of her stepdad. And then she talked about how he was depressed and he was going through symptoms of Alzheimer's. And what I don't understand, all this talk of we love and cared for each other, but not once did she think to take him to a psychiatrist or to a neurologist or to a specialist to get him checked out. So I truly believe that whenever we get things done on our end, after Joshua is here and safe and sound, and ours officially, when he's ready and when he's of the age that it's appropriate, we are going to go forward and we are going to let him do what he needs to do to have closure. And I am going to go forward and make sure people like her do not work with children and families ever again. I wrote documentation to the commissioner after being instructed to a few places to help me and the knowledge to know what to say. I wrote the commissioner of Tennessee a document, 13 pages, about my situation, about how the foster mom, said that my son was sick and he was not, and the caseworker knew, and for 4 months this went on. And I said the caseworker could have easily supervised our visits. I don't know why she didn't. They just wanted to terminate my rights, and they were playing dirty to do so. And now my son has suffered for 14 years. My son just sat in a group home for Christmas for the first time, and for Thanksgiving, and Halloween. I am praying that we get an approval, because since I wrote the documents and included pictures and sent all those to the governor, the senator, the commissioner, I have received the ability to try and be a foster parent. I live in the state of Utah. My son's case is in Tennessee. Utah accepted the ICPC from Tennessee. What are you doing? Okay, Mama. I'm trying to talk, Mama. And they've been telling us what to do, and we're doing what they want us to do. We've passed the Arizona background check. I do have a background in South Carolina from when I was younger, and I was dumb and stupid, and I wrote a letter about that, and I said I am different. I have references. I've been completely clean and sober with no relapse for almost 4 years. Hey, I've been clean from IV drugs completely since 2014. I had a brief relapse in 2018 when my father passed, and I got it together a year later. And, that was rough for me and for my husband. My husband and I were also going through a rough patch in our marriage. We didn't know how to handle problems back then. Nobody ever taught us how, and we ended up relapsing. And now we have the tools. Now we know. We've been doing it for almost 4 years now. Now we know how to fix things in our lives. We can't fix everybody, but I know how to fix myself when I'm broken. I know what I need to be repaired, and my husband is the same way, and our community is the same way. My son, instantly when we were connected again, he started doing better. He quit getting in trouble with the law until he ran away from home the day after his birthday this year because he was being strangled. And CPS feels like, oh, well, he had marijuana in his room. You don't put your hands on a child. I don't care what you find in their room. You don't have the right to do that. Stop making excuses to be physical with our children. They said, oh, well, he's been doing this. But if it was some other kid and some other parent that you hadn't been associated with before CPS, you had been all over that. You'd have been snatching that kid up to get your little $10,000 bonus. That's all they're doing. And then the whole time they've got our children in custody, they're getting money. Now they're trying to tell my son's little friend that he gets to talk to, because I don't get to talk to him because my rights were terminated, even though I'm being considered for foster parenting. That makes no sense. His little friend said, oh, he can't be fostered out until 45 days after January 31st. I said, the heck he can't. I said, an ICPC is an ICPC. Once that case transfers, that's it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Why can't he be fostered out? He's done nothing wrong. He's been a product of his environment. There is not no kind of care that the state can give him that my wonderful paid insurance can deliver. Come on now. Like state care is better than the Care Signet insurance can give somebody. Sure. I just, they're all about money. That's all they're about. They do not care about our children. If you go and look up the local news in Tennessee about CPS, right now there are children sleeping in offices They would rather have these children sleeping in offices collecting a check than getting these kids sent back into their parents' homes. And these parents, like me and my ex-husband, we fell right back into addiction when we lost Joseph, my last one. That was it. We thought, well, we're just idiots and we don't deserve to be parents because we thought this state entity knew more than we did. They don't know nothing. They use your kids against you, and then they create. Look at the people they created. I was an addict for how long? They ruin lives. And then our children age out of the system, broken. It's ridiculous. They end up going to prison if they don't go to rehab first, because there's some state workers that actually bring drugs into these group homes and they traffic our children with them. It's ridiculous. We've got to band together. We've got to start educating ourselves. That's why I want to create an advocacy group. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but I want to create an advocacy group, and it will be on Facebook. I will link it below whenever I do create it, because I can come back and edit these videos. But I want to create an advocacy group where people can come and share their stories. The only thing is, on Facebook, with all the advocacy groups there are and groups about CPS corruption, there's all kinds of scammers and spammers in there, and these moderators don't remove them. It's ridiculous. So I need to get a few moderators together first, people that I know I can trust to do the job. And hopefully we can get something going. But first and foremost, look up what CPS policies and procedures are in your state. Look up the policies and procedures for the ICPC in your state, because there's a separate manual for those. Look up policy and procedures for foster children in your state. Look up policies and procedures for court-appointed attorneys in your state. Hold them to their own policies and their own laws, and look up and read these policies. Study them. And when they break them, write them down. And that is what you will base your federal litigations on, my friend. They broke policies. We have got to start educating ourselves. And there's people in these groups that I'm a part of that say, oh, well, CPS is trying to get a hold of me. They're calling my old, they're calling my old landlord. They're calling my kids' old school or whatever. Listen, unless they have a court order, and that's what you need to ask them. Do you have a court order? And if they say no, say, then listen, I'm not going to talk to you. The first thing they're going to say is, oh, do you have something to hide? So just go ahead and say, it's not because I don't have anything to hide, but it's because I don't trust CPS. You do more harm than you do good. You find things wrong with families and you take their children. Everyone knows you do this. So until you get a court order to take my child from me, stay the hell away. And you have the right to tell them that. If you have a caseworker that continues to come and bother you, you need to file a protection order. They have now volunteers that volunteer to go and knock on doors. Don't talk to them. Don't talk to them at all. I know some of you who are in recovery, you love to tell people you've gotten sober. Don't tell them that. Don't tell them anything, because if you say, oh, well, I've been sober. Oh, you had a drug problem for how long? Don't. Don't talk to them. They are not your friend. So study these policies and procedures. That is the one thing that you can do. You can write down the ones they've broken. You could do a documentation just like I did about what you've been through with CPS, how it has damaged you. At the bottom of that document, put the names of every person involved in your story, the number, address. If you don't have any of that, that's fine, but you need to try to find something. Put all that information there and let them know, I will wait 30 days, and if I do not hear that you are in receipt of my letter, I will go forward with a federal litigation for these policies broken. List your policies below. Include any court paperwork and attach it. If you don't have evidence of what you are claiming, and I mean evidence that's beyond the shadow of a doubt, please do not make any accusation of it unless you can prove it. Okay? All right? And, you know, if you can't prove it, don't put it in there. I'm able to prove everything that I'm talking about, you know. So there's a whole human being that was born right in that time frame that I was being kept from my child, you know, and the mother of that human being, she understands, hey, we got to do the right thing. We got to do the right thing, you know, and honestly, the story will speak for itself, and it already has. Now you know, me and my husband are just waiting to be approved for foster parents to get my son, and I believe we will. I do not believe that God has caused this to happen for no reason. When you start doing things a certain way and you start believing in things that are impossible, they start coming true and they start happening. So if you've been feeling it in your soul that you can get your child back from CPS, feel free to share your story down in the comments. Anybody who's going to start bashing, I will immediately move and block, because we're not going to have any harassing here on this channel. This is Nicole's Recovery Corner. We come here to recover from things that are hurtful. So I thank you for coming and listening and watching. I'm going to go spend some time with my husband. My dog's over here. You are a silly girl. Isn't she beautiful? She looks like a little ginger snap. Look at my little tater tot. Lizzie, why do you let her do that to you? Oh, I will be coming back with another video, and we will be doing a series. I'm also going to be doing a series of real life experiences, and I'll share more about that later. But you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful new year. And remember, share your story below, any type of CPS issues that you've dealt with. I am going to be creating a group, as I said, and when I do, I will link that group below in the description, and I'll make sure all of you in the comments know about it. Stay peaceful out there.